After hosting a 3-day party for 50 guests at my house, my mother-in-law left me in a terrible condition and with a $250,000 debt. They celebrated her anniversary while I was in critical care. Everyone went white when I spoke one word when I arrived home. Before we go any further, please indicate which nation you are viewing the video from. Have fun listening. Victoria cherished her house. She frequently thought, "The house I built myself," grinning as she surveyed the comfortable living area. She didn't really build the bricks or roof the house, of course, but she did earn the money for the down payment, the mortgage, and the remodeling. Young and ambitious, she had dreamed of her own little enclave, a place where she could escape the hustle and bustle of the outside world and simply be herself, even before she got married. Thus the dream was realized. An apple tree, a tiny garden, and a 2-story house in a peaceful lane delighted the sight and soothed the spirit. After the wedding, her future husband, Sergey, moved in with her and appeared to fit in right away. He took everything for granted without exerting any effort or investing a single ruble. Victoria didn't protest. She was prepared to offer everything she had, and she desired a family as well as warmth and comfort. Sergey was initially kind, or at least he made an effort to appear so. He pledged to love her forever and complimented her cooking abilities and home design sense. Victoria had faith. Over time, the rose-colored glasses started to fall off, but she still wanted to believe. Sergey's assistants around the house had virtually vanished. He was routinely complimenting people, and he was staying late at work more and more. He was used to being comfortable and used to everything being done on its own. He forgot to whom he owed this well-being and started to view the house as something that was obvious. Svetlana Pavlovna, his mother, stood out in particular. Victoria was disliked by the mother-in-law right away. She could have envied her freedom. Maybe she believed her kids should be paired with someone better. Victoria was frequently chastised by Svetlana Pavlovna for her cooking, clothing, and household management. She paid great attention to everything, and nothing was commended. "Here I was at your age," she said at the start of her uproar. Victoria was aware that a lengthy list of her flaws would come next. Svetlana Pavlovna believed it was her responsibility to offer insightful counsel, which was actually disguised criticism. Her words, "You work too much, Vika. You're too concerned about your husband. A man should feel like he's the boss in the house, and you're eclipsing him with your career." Alternatively, Victoria attempted to disregard her mother-in-law's scathing comments. "I don't understand why you need this garden. You're just wasting time and money on it. You'd be better off buying yourself a new fur coat." She saw that Svetlana Pavlovna was only attempting to make her presence known at her own expense. She made an effort to keep the family harmonious and avoided any arguments or controversies. She wished that Svetlana Pavlovna would eventually embrace her and regard her as a devoted wife to her son rather than as a competitor. Unfortunately, Victoria's efforts to bring about peace were not aided by Sergey. He would rather remain impartial and avoid getting involved in disputes between his mother and wife. And he shrugged his shoulders. "That's how my mother is," he added. Don't pay attention." However, how could she ignore her mother-in-law's torture-inducing visits? Sergey didn't appear to comprehend Victoria's attempts to communicate with him about how difficult it was for her. He waved her away, asking, "What are you making up? Mom just loves you in her own way. She loves you in her own way. This is the time when you are continually compared to other women, when you are constantly reminded of your flaws, and when they attempt to denigrate and humiliate you." Victoria could feel the disappointment and bitterness building up inside her. She realized that Sergey was not the man she had envisioned spending the rest of her life with, and that her marriage was far from perfect. However, she continued to hold out hope and faith in the best. She didn't want her family to be destroyed. She didn't want to acknowledge that her decision had been a mistake. Victoria cherished her house. It served as her haven, stronghold, and seat of authority. Furthermore, nobody could have predicted how soon she would no longer feel safe in this house. Nobody could have predicted that the individuals she regarded as her family would cruelly turn on her. The light was barely peeking through Victoria's bedroom's heavy curtains when she was whisked away by ambulance. It all happened in a flash. Sharp agony, unconsciousness, terrified physicians' expressions, and the hospital's flashing lights outside the car window. She urgently needed resuscitation when doctors determined that she had problems from an earlier procedure. Sergei appeared to be hypnotized. He was unable to offer any words of comfort or support, as he saw her being carried away in the emergency department. Victoria was on the brink of death in the initial days following the procedure. She slipped into hazy dreams and shards of memory, hardly realizing what was occurring. She used all of her power to fight for her life. She didn't have time for her controlling mother-in-law, Sergei, or her house. All she wanted was to live. Additionally, actual turmoil was breaking out at Victoria's home, while she was in critical care. Feeling invincible, Svetlana Pavlovna chose to take advantage of the circumstance. She thought, why waste it, since Vika can't see or hear anything anyway, as she gazed at the large living room that was bathed in morning light. Suddenly, it occurred to him to throw a lavish celebration for his 50th birthday, making all of his neighbors swoon with jealousy. As usual, Sergei was afraid to disagree with his mother. Her pressure was too much for him to handle. He was too accustomed to bowing to her. In addition, he secretly thought that a grand party would help him get his mother's approval and show her that he was valuable. He consented to assist in planning the party. Without considering the repercussions, Svetlana Pavlovna took prompt, decisive action. She summoned all of her friends and family, invited them to a lavish 50-person feast, arranged pricey catering with fine food and beverages, and invited musicians with the promise of a sizable payout. Since it was her day and her victory, she didn't cut any corners. Over the course of 3 days, the festivities started on Friday night. After transforming Victoria's home into a makeshift camp, the visitors had a wild time, drinking, eating and dancing without realizing that it was someone else's home, furnishings or dishes. The focus of attention was Svetlana Pavlovna, who was showered with praise and appreciative looks. With everyone's attention and wine in his belly, Sergei felt wanted and significant. The inebriated visitors did not participate in the ceremony with the decorations. Food and wine had left stains on the pricey Italian furniture Victoria had so lovingly selected. During the dance, the old chest of drawers she had received from her grandmother shattered. The loud music caused the crystal chandeliers to tremble, posing a constant risk of falling on the dancers' heads. Victoria's pride and delight were particularly affected. Inebriated visitors walked among the flower beds, stomping on flowers and shattering shrubs. The shoes and dancing made the lawn a filthy mess. Empty bottles and trash cluttered the ornamental pond, which Victoria had cleaned and adorned herself. However, there was something else that was worse. With Sergei's implicit approval, Svetlana Pavlovna used Victoria's credit card, which Sergei had access to cover all of these outrageous costs. They didn't believe Victoria would have to pay for their wild fun, so they spent money without keeping track. They continued to order food, beverages, and entertainment until their credit card balance was completely depleted. The neighbors who were seeing the events were taken aback. They heard loud music and yells from intoxicated people, and they witnessed heaps of trash being removed from Victoria's home. They knew something wasn't right, but they were scared to step in. Svetlana Pavlovna was an influential and well-known individual. Nobody wished to trouble her. Many people also wished they could have the lavish celebration since they were envious. Baba Nina, an old neighbor, was the only one brave enough to confront Sergei and voice her disapproval. Gazing at the tattered grass and shattered flowers, she murmured reproachfully, "Serioza, what are you doing? Vika loved this house so much. How could you allow this?" Sergei simply waved her away with an inebriated smile. "What's causing your concern, Babanin? Mom's anniversary is today. Later, Vika will tidy up everything," he said. "She's a housewife," and turned to return to the home where the wild joy went on. Victoria started to regain consciousness in the final days of her critical care unit hospitalization. Her consciousness gradually cleared, but she felt exhausted and weak. She recalled her calm life, her garden, and her house. She was eager to go home, greet Sergei, and enjoy the fresh air. She was still unaware of what lay ahead. While she was battling for her life, she had not yet come to terms with what her comfortable world had become. Only a few days remained till she would return, until she would be able to witness everything firsthand and realize the extent of the treachery. Victoria felt weak yet determined after being released from the hospital. Eager to get back to her peaceful, comfortable environment, She dialed a cab and provided her address. She pictured how, after everything she had gone through, she would make herself a cup of strong tea, sit in her favorite windowsill chair, and just gaze over her garden, regaining her strength. Beyond the barrier, she had no clue what sort of nightmare was ahead. Victoria took a big breath of fresh air as she unwrapped herself and went outside her home as the cab parked. But a harsh smell of tobacco smoke and stale food assailed her nostrils in place of the pleasant perfume of flowers and freshly cut grass. She scowled, but explained it away as the result of her recent sickness. She was still not able to smell well. Victoria came to the gate and froze. Her once proud garden was damaged and trodden underfoot. The lawn was littered with trash and cigarette butts. Plants were ripped, and flowers were scattered on the ground. Pain sank into her heart. What had taken place here? On the porch were crumpled paper cups and empty beer bottles. The door stood open. Pulling herself together, Victoria pushed the door open after swallowing the knot in her throat. She was astonished by what she saw. The home she held in such high regard had become a pigsty. Food leftovers, broken plates, cigarette butts, and trash were all over the place. The furnishings were filthy and damaged. The walls had greasy stains and evidence of alcohol spills. The oppressive stench of beer, smoke, and unwashed people permeated the air. Victoria scanned the area, attempting to figure out what had happened. This was true barbarism, not simply a mess. Who could damage her house like this? Svetlana Pavlovna sat at a table in the living room, surrounded by half-empty bottles and dirty plates. In the midst of all of this commotion, as like nothing had occurred, she drank tea from a porcelain cup with composure. Her face lit up with a smug smile. Calmly, she murmured, "Oh, Vikusia, you're back." As though we were spending my anniversary here and Victoria had just been gone for a few hours. Unable to speak, Victoria gazed at her mother-in-law in silence. She had a surge of rage and hopelessness. How were they able to achieve this? How could they have made this her home? "Sergei, where are you?" Trying to remain composed, she eventually managed to squeeze out. "He went on business, Sergei," Svetlana Pavlovna said, waving her hand. "He will return shortly, so don't worry. Meanwhile, have a seat and sip some tea." Victoria gave a headshake. She was shocked by what she heard. Svetlana Pavlovna pretended that everything was all right, and that she was entitled to govern this place as it was her home. Victoria whispered softly, attempting to control her tremors. "What happened here?" Svetlana Pavlovna shrugged and said, "What do you mean what? We were celebrating, having fun." Victoria felt her legs give out. "What can't I? I was celebrating an anniversary, and you were still lying in the hospital. So what difference does it make to you?" she said. As she tried to process what she had heard, she collapsed into a chair. Phrase fragments and recollections of joyful times spent in this place rushed across her mind. And all of this was destroyed, trodden underfoot, and crossed out. Glancing around the room, she inquired, "Where are my things?" "Oh, come on, Vikusia," Svetlana Pavlovna said, waving her fingers. "Where are my photographs? Where are my books?" Victoria was furious and said, "They're not that important. We cleaned up a bit, threw out some things. Why do you need this junk?" Svetlana Pavlovna raised her eyebrows in astonishment as she got up from her chair and exclaimed, "Get out of my house right now." She was trying not to scream. "What do you say? This is also my home. I'm staying here because I reside here." "It's my house," Victoria said emphatically. "You are not here, and I purchased it before to marriage. I'll phone the cops, so be ready immediately." Pavlovna Svetlana chuckled. "The police? You and your cops are unnecessary. Since Sergei is my son, he is entitled to reside here. I also reside here since he does." Victoria realized there was no use in disputing with her. She just pulled out her cell phone and punched in the police number. "Hi, are the cops here? I would want to report property damage and unauthorized entry into my house. Address." Svetlana Pavlovna leaped from her seat and attempted to take the phone away. "What are you doing? Are you insane? Let me show you the cops." Pushing her aside, Victoria carried on speaking into the phone. "Yes, I insist that the patrol arrive right away. I'm being threatened by a stranger who won't leave my residence." Victoria placed the phone on the table once the discussion was over and turned to face Svetlana Pavlovna. Her eyes were filled with resolve and preparedness to protect her life and her home, not with fear or uncertainty. Svetlana Pavlovna gave her a furious glance and spoke. "I'm waiting for the police," she stated coolly, "and you will answer for everything you've done here. Vikusia, will you regret this? You'll be sorry you did it." Victoria waited for the cops to come without saying anything. She made the decision to check her home to see what else had occurred while she waited. She froze in terror as she entered the bedroom. The closets were overturned, and everything she had was strewn all across the room. Victoria's head spun around. She collapsed on the ground and started sobbing. She was frightened, outraged, and wounded. She struggled to stand, exited the bedroom, and made her way to the office. She noticed a bank statement on the table there. She took it in her hands, looked at the numbers, and felt a shiver go through her body. 250,000 rubles. 250,000 rubles in debt she hadn't accrued. Victoria took a seat at the table and put her hands over her face. How were they able to achieve this? How could Sergei have allowed his mother to treat her like this? He deceived her despite her unwavering love, support, and trust for him. In the most disgusting manner, betrayed her. It was then that she heard a police vehicle pull up. Victoria got up from her chair and wiped away her tears. Victoria inhaled deeply before answering the doorbell. On the doorway were two police officers. "Hello," she said. "Hello," one of the officers said. "I called you." Victoria opened the door for the police officers and gestured to Svetlana Pavlovna, who was standing in the living room and staring at her. "Come inside, please. This woman has illegally entered my home and refuses to leave," Victoria stated. "Please show me your paperwork. She has also destroyed my property and used my credit card fraudulently." The cops listened to her carefully before turning to Svetlana Pavlovna. "You have no right to detain me," said Svetlana Pavlovna, refusing to produce her documents, "because this is my home and I live here." She kept yelling and resisting the police's attempts to calm her down. They eventually had to remove her from the residence by force. Victoria felt a tremendous weight lifted off her shoulders as she saw Svetlana Pavlovna being escorted to a police vehicle. She was prepared even though she knew it was only the beginning and that she still had a lot of battling to do. She was prepared to struggle for her happiness and independence. She refused to let anyone manipulate her life or push her around ever again. Victoria moved swiftly and with a ruthless resolve she hadn't anticipated from herself. Svetlana Pavlovna hardly slept that night when the police showed around and she was taken into custody. Anger and adrenaline kept her attentive. She went to visit a lawyer first thing in the morning, even though she was exhausted. A middle-aged lady with a sharp eye, the lawyer listened intently to her account. She took notes in her notepad and only sometimes interrupted to ask clarifying questions. "The situation is, of course, unpleasant but quite solvable. You have every chance of winning the case," the lawyer said after Victoria was done. "The house was bought before the marriage, so it is your sole property. The fact that a credit card was used without authorization and that property was damaged is easily proven." A burden was lifted off Victoria's shoulders. "What must I do?" "First, we file for divorce," she said. "And then we sue for property damage and credit card misuse," the attorney said. "Third, we are requesting an order to prevent Svetlana Pavlovna from approaching your residence." Victoria nodded, prepared to do anything. She signed all the required paperwork, feeling as though she was letting go of the past with every stroke, the past in which she was gullible and innocent and let herself be exploited. Never again. Subpoenas arrived swiftly. Sergei seemed utterly perplexed. He contacted Victoria, pleaded with her to change her ways, told her that her mother had gone too far, and promised to make things right.
Victoria insisted.
Over the phone, she asked Sergei, "Did you know what was going on? You chose her over me, and you did nothing when they destroyed my house. Now enjoy the rewards." Conversely, Svetlana Pavlovna was defiant. She denied any responsibility, saying Victoria was just an unappreciative daughter-in-law who didn't value her attention. She insisted that she sacrificed everything for Sergei's pleasure. In court, Victoria exuded confidence and composure. She supplied all the required paperwork, including a bank statement, pictures of the demolished home, and neighbor testimonies. By the way, the neighbors were first reluctant to get in touch, since they were worried about meddling in other people's personal matters. However, they consented to testify after witnessing Victoria's resolve and outrage at her circumstances. The testimony of Baba Nina, an old neighbor who witnessed everything that took on in Victoria's home while she was away, was very insightful. She spoke into great detail about the raucous party, the inebriated visitors, the damaged furniture, and the trampled yard. In court, Sergei looked pitiful. He attempted to defend himself by claiming that he tried to stop his mother but was unable to do so, and that he had no idea how things would turn out. Victoria gave him a disdainful glance. It was her own fault that she hadn't seen his weakness and lack of courage before. Svetlana Pavlovna persisted in denying her guilt, accusing Victoria of being frantic and dishonest, but the court was unconvinced. Svetlana Pavlovna was found guilty by the court of disrupting public order and using a credit card without authorization. She received a fine and was prohibited from going near Victoria's house. It was determined that Sergei had damaged Victoria's property. He was ordered by the court to cover all damages, including the price of buying new furnishings and fixing the property. Furthermore, Victoria's divorce suit was allowed by the court. Victoria was really relieved after the trial. She prevailed and protected her home. Most significantly, though, she was released from her mother-in-law's and husband's poisonous influence. Victoria was still the owner of the house. Sergei was responsible for paying for all of the costs. Victoria let out a sigh of relief. It was her first triumph. The most difficult phase was about to begin, putting her life and the house back in order. Victoria didn't postpone it. She employed a group of people who completed the repairs fast and effectively. She purchased new, contemporary, and fashionable furniture and tossed out all the old pieces that made her think of the past. The house was filled with light and air when she repainted the walls in bright hues. She replaced trampled flower beds in the garden with beautiful flower beds and well-kept lawns. She purchased new carpets, drapes, and tableware. She gradually turned her house back into a comfortable and secure space. This approach involved both physical and emotional aspects. Victoria let go of her disappointments and frustrations by getting rid of old possessions. She let go of the old and let a new life begin. Victoria found serenity one evening, while enjoying a cup of tea on the porch of the refurbished home. She really needed the quiet and peace that surrounded her. Victoria at last realized that sometimes the nicest thing that may happen is losing family members. Sometimes losing everything that ties you to the past is necessary in order to discover who you are. Sometimes you have to completely dismantle the old life in order to establish a new one. When she opened her eyes, she saw her home. It was hers alone, and it was lovely and comfortable. Her destiny's mistress was her. She refused to let anybody rule her life ever again. She will never again put up with being made fun of and humiliated. She will never again live for other people's sakes.